is a particular kind of night that feels different from the others. Not stormy, not dramatic, just different. The kind where the air is very still and the dark seems somehow deeper than usual. And you find yourself looking up or listening with a quality of attention you don't normally have during the day. A feeling that something is just at the edge of your perception. Not threatening, not urgent, just there, waiting to be noticed. Tonight we're going to that edge, not to the frightening unknown, not to the kind of mystery that keeps you awake with unease, but to the other kind, the kind that makes the world feel larger than it did an hour ago, the kind of not knowing that is actually a form of wonder, if you let it be. Because here is something worth sitting with before we begin. For every question science has answered, and it has answered so many, painstakingly, beautifully, with instruments of extraordinary sensitivity and minds of extraordinary patience. For every one of those answers, the territory beyond the known grows larger, not smaller. Every discovery reveals new edges. Every solved mystery illuminates the outlines of 3 more waiting in the dark. This is not a failure. It is the shape of a living world. A world that is genuinely, stubbornly, magnificently more than we have yet understood. And that world is not somewhere else. It is not in a distant galaxy or a sealed laboratory. It is here, in the ground beneath you, in the air above you, in the ocean depths and the mountain passes, and the forest floors, and the space between stars. It is in the occasional inexplicable moment inside your own mind. It is, if you pay the right kind of attention, everywhere. Tonight I want to show you some of it, not to explain it, because much of it cannot be explained yet, and some of it may never be fully explained, and that is exactly the point. But to introduce you to it, to let you spend some time at the edge of what is known, where the questions are still open and the universe is still surprising us, and where that surprise, if you let yourself feel it, is one of the most peaceful things in the world. Because wonder, it turns out, is very good for rest. The mind that has been held by something genuinely astonishing, something larger than its own worries, something that puts the small urgencies of the day into their proper proportion. That mind sleeps differently, more easily, with a kind of settled curiosity that is the opposite of the anxious turning that keeps so many people awake. So let yourself be held by what we're about to explore. Let your body soften into wherever you are resting. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breathing slow to something unhurried. You don't need to remember any of this. You don't need to form opinions or reach conclusions. You just need to listen with the particular quality of attention that comes naturally at this hour. Open, quiet, gently curious. And if these journeys to the edges of the known are something you want to return to, if soothing science has become part of your evenings, part of the ritual of letting the day go, then subscribe if you haven't yet. Leave a like if tonight feels like something worth finding again. Share it with someone who needs a quiet place to land. And then forget all of that, because the mystery is waiting, and it is very beautiful. Let's begin. Start with what's beneath you, not the floor, not the foundation. Go deeper, through layers of soil and sediment, through rock that has been compressed for millions of years, through the slow, hot interior of a planet that has been alive in its own geological way for 4.5 billion years. Down there, something is happening. Something is always happening. And one of the strangest and most quietly wonderful discoveries of modern geophysics is that the Earth is never truly silent. Sensitive instruments listening to the planet. Instruments buried in quiet locations, far from the noise of human civilization, have detected something that took scientists years to fully accept. A constant background vibration, a deep, slow hum that is always present, always there, even on the calmest days when no earthquakes are occurring and no storms are moving across the oceans. This hum is far below what human ears can detect. Each cycle stretches over many seconds, the pace of something enormous, breathing very slowly. Some of it can be traced to ocean waves pressing on the seafloor, some to wind pushing against continental edges. But even after accounting for all the known sources, something remains. A residual signal, a part of the planet's continuous murmur that doesn't fit neatly into any existing explanation. The Earth is humming to itself, and we don't fully know why. What strikes me about this is not the mystery, though the mystery is real and ongoing. It is the image of it, the idea that beneath everything, beneath the noise and the motion and the weather and the tectonic drama, there is this constant, deep note, a tone that has been sounding since before there were ears to hear it, a vibration in the stone that predates every living thing on the surface. You are resting on something that has its own song. You just can't hear it. Go deeper still, or go horizontal, into places where the Earth's hidden complexity becomes suddenly, strangely visible. There are valleys in the world where compasses behave in ways they shouldn't. Travelers who walk into certain remote landscapes describe watching their compass needles drift, hesitate, and then point in directions that match nothing on any map. Move a few steps and the needle may swing again, not randomly, but deliberately, as if something beneath the surface is reaching up with invisible fingers to redirect it. Scientists who visit these places with modern instruments find the same thing. Magnetic anomalies so intricate that simple explanations don't hold. The variations can shift across very short distances, creating pockets where navigation becomes genuinely unreliable, where a person confident in one direction can take 20 steps and find that direction is quietly changed. Magnetic rock formations can explain some of this, but in the most puzzling of these valleys, the variations are too complex, too specific, too intricately patterned to fit the explanation of a simple deposit beneath the soil. The Earth's magnetic field, which we tend to think of as stable, uniform, a constant guide, is, at these scales, nothing of the kind. It is local, it is particular, it is shaped by specific arrangements of specific minerals, under specific pressures that have accumulated over timescales we can barely imagine. Every valley has its own relationship with the magnetic field. Most of us never notice, but in these places the compass needle tells you that the ground has a character, a particular hidden personality that has nothing to do with how it looks from the surface. The landscape has secrets the eye can't see. The instruments can barely keep up. Now come up from underground and go to where the air meets the stone. In certain mountain ranges, on still days when the wind has died and the air is calm enough to hear clearly, something happens that has puzzled researchers and enchanted visitors for as long as anyone has been paying attention. The mountains sing, not metaphorically, not in the poetic sense. Actually, measurably, recordably, the peaks and rock faces and frozen surfaces emit tones, pure low notes that drift out from the stone itself, that rise and fall with the seasons, that change pitch from summer to winter in ways that suggest something like temperature-dependent resonance happening inside the mountain. Ice can vibrate. Rock under pressure can vibrate. Thin films of ice forming and melting along fractures can behave like the strings of an instrument. And when the geometry is exactly right, when the mountain's specific architecture of chambers of faces and angles aligned with exactly the right conditions of temperature and atmosphere, a note emerges. Different mountains have different notes. Different seasons bring different pitches. The mountain range becomes an orchestra whose score is written by temperature, by wind, by the slow seasonal cycle of freezing and thaw. Researchers have tried to map the exact geometry that produces these tones, and they often find it elusive. The conditions are so precisely balanced that small changes silence the whole thing. The mountain sings only when everything is just so, only when the physical variables align into a configuration that no one designed and no one fully understands. There is something about this that I find deeply calming. The idea that complexity, enormous geological ancient complexity, can produce something as simple and beautiful as a pure tone drifting from a mountain face. That underneath the drama of rock and ice, there is a kind of quiet music, playing to no audience, shaped by nothing except physics. The mountain doesn't know it's singing, but it is. Let's go beneath the surface again, much further this time, in deep boreholes and subterranean observatories, instruments that listen for the slow creaking of shifting rock have found something else alongside the expected signals. Repeating pulses, not geological noise, not random fluctuation, pulses that arrive with curious regularity, ticking away in the darkness at intervals, measured in minutes or hours, their strength rising and falling over months, persisting even when nearby regions fall quiet. They are too rhythmic to be random, too consistent to be dismissed, and they don't correspond to known tidal patterns, seismic events, or anything happening on the surface. Some scientists suspect Subtle movements of fluid in deep aquifers, or interactions between magma and the solid rock above it. But the match is never perfect. The rhythms continue independently of the explanations offered for them. The planet, it seems, keeps time with clocks we have only just learned to notice. Think about that for a moment. Buried beneath layers of stone, completely hidden, completely independent of anything on the surface. Rhythms, persistent, patient, regular rhythms, going about their business whether anyone is listening or not. Whether anyone is listening or not. Come back to the surface. Come to somewhere flat and dry and ancient. A desert lake bed, cracked and pale, stretching to the horizon under a sky of extraordinary blue. And look at the ground. Here, in certain of these places, the most famous being in California's Death Valley, though others exist in various deserts around the world. Something moves that should not move. Rocks, not pebbles, stones, some of them heavy enough to require significant effort to lift. They sit on the flat lake bed, and they carve trails through the sediment behind them, long, wandering, sometimes parallel, sometimes curving, documenting journeys that no one has ever witnessed in the act of occurring. For decades, the explanations were unsatisfying. Wind? The trails don't always follow prevailing directions. Human activity? The locations are remote, the trails clearly old, and cameras installed to catch the movement recorded nothing for years. Then researchers finally caught it. In certain conditions, very specific rare conditions, thin sheets of ice form on the surface of the lake bed overnight. The next day, as temperatures rise, the ice breaks into panels. Wind catches the panels, and the rocks, trapped in the floating ice, are carried forward, slowly, silently, leaving their trails in the sediment below. It sounds, when you describe it, almost absurdly simple. But here is what I find extraordinary about this story. The phenomenon was happening quietly, patiently, across decades, and the mechanism that produced it was so rare, so dependent on a precise combination of temperature and moisture and timing, that it took modern researchers with cameras and sensors years to actually observe it. The rocks were moving in plain sight, in a place people had visited for years, and the cause was invisible until the exact right moment. This is what I mean when I say that the world is more than it appears. Not mystically, not impossibly, just genuinely more. The surface reality of things is real, but it is not the whole story. Beneath and behind and between the visible facts, there are processes operating at timescales and under conditions that ordinary attention doesn't catch. You have to look at the right time, in the right way, with the right instruments. Or sometimes
You just have to wait patiently until the world decides to show you. There is one more thing I want to tell you about the Earth before we move on. In certain active volcanic regions, monitoring stations listen continuously for the deep vibrations that signal changes in magma pressure beneath the surface. These instruments are sensitive enough to detect subtle shifts long before any visible change occurs above ground. And sometimes, the signals they record are not what anyone expects. Instead of chaotic rumbling, the kind of noise you'd associate with enormous quantities of molten rock moving through underground channels, the sensors detect something else: smooth, tonal sequences, vibrations that rise and fall with a continuity that resembles slowly shifting music, patterns that sound, when converted to frequencies humans can hear, genuinely melodic. The volcano is not just grumbling. It is, in some sense, playing. Each volcano has its own signature, its own characteristic tones, shaped by the specific geometry of its underground chambers, the viscosity of its particular magma, the arrangement of trapped gases at particular pressures. Change any of those variables and the music changes. Scientists study these harmonic tremors because they carry real information about what's happening in the magma below, about pressure and flow, and the building or releasing of geological tension. The music is meaningful in the same way that a heartbeat is meaningful. It tells you something about the state of the system producing it. But it is also simply beautiful. A sound that has been playing beneath the Earth's surface for as long as volcanoes have existed. A geological music that no one composed and no one performs. That arises spontaneously from the physics of hot stone and trapped gas and pressure differential. The planet has been making this sound for billions of years. We only recently built instruments sensitive enough to notice. Let that settle. We have been listening tonight to the deep hum below human hearing, to the compass needles spinning in hidden magnetic fields, to the mountains singing in pure tones, to the underground rhythms ticking in the dark, to the rocks moving across desert floors in rare moments of ice and wind, to the volcanoes playing their own particular music. All of it has been happening continuously for longer than our species has existed. None of it required our attention to continue. But something happens when you know about it. Something shifts in how the ground beneath you feels. The planet you're resting on, that is carrying you right now through space, is not the static backdrop you might have imagined. It is active, complex, continuously in motion at scales ranging from the microscopic vibration of a crystal to the slow turning of geological processes that take millions of years to complete. And somewhere in between those scales, right now, beneath you, the earth is humming. The mountains somewhere are finding their seasonal note. The rocks in the desert are waiting for the right conditions. The volcano is playing its particular chord in the dark. All of it, always,
Whether anyone is listening or not, you are resting on something alive. That, I find, is one of the more comforting thoughts available at this hour. Let your breathing slow to match something unhurried. Let the weight of your body settle into the ground that has been here, patient and continuous, and quietly extraordinary, for longer than imagination easily reaches. You are held. You have always been held. Leave the ground behind for a moment. Come up to the surface, to the place where earth meets water meets air, to the borders of things, because that is where much of what I want to tell you tonight lives. Not in the solid interior of the planet, not in the clean emptiness of space, but at the edges, at the boundaries between elements, in the places where different worlds press against each other and something unexpected emerges from the contact. Water that glows without life, sky that flashes without storms, ice that forms perfect spheres in clear weather, sound that rises from the deep without any creature to make it. The borders of the world are strange, and they are beautiful. Start with the ocean at night. Not the ocean you might imagine, not the bioluminescent blue sparkling of plankton stirred by a boat's wake, which is extraordinary in its own right and has a known explanation. Something different, something that has been reported by sailors for centuries and only recently confirmed by satellite imagery. On rare nights, vast portions of the sea begin to glow, not with the point-like flashes of individual organisms, with a uniform, steady, milky radiance that spreads across the surface in patches larger than some countries. Ships crossing these luminous fields report the same thing. A pale sheen surrounding the whole, a soft light that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, that lingers and doesn't flicker, that makes the ocean look like it has swallowed the moon. When researchers examine the water, they often find no obvious explanation. No dense blooms of bioluminescent organisms, no clear chemical reaction, just the glow spreading across miles of open ocean, visible from space. Some scientists suspect vast communities of bacteria, species that produce light continuously, rather than in the triggered flashes of more familiar luminescent life. Others propose chemical reactions in the water column that we don't yet fully understand. The satellite data confirms that the phenomenon is real, that it spans enormous distances, and that it appears and disappears without obvious cause. The ocean sometimes simply becomes luminous, and for a few rare hours, a ship can sail through a sea that glows from within like something dreaming. Now come up from the water and into the air, high above the clouds, far above the weather systems that most people think of as the sky. Something else is happening. Cameras mounted on aircraft and satellites have been capturing it for decades. Brief, enormous flashes of light that bloom above thunderstorms and expand upward towards space. Not lightning as we know it, not the forked, downward striking discharge between cloud and ground. Something that moves in the opposite direction, something that spreads upward and outward in shapes that have their own names, because they are their own phenomena entirely. Sprites, vast reddish structures that bloom above storm clouds, like slow jellyfish made of light, lasting only milliseconds, but stretching dozens of kilometers through the upper atmosphere. Elves, expanding rings of luminescence that spread horizontally at the edge of space, in the fraction of a second after a lightning strike below. Blue jets, narrow columns of blue light that shoot upward from storm tops, climbing toward the stratosphere before fading. Each of these was unknown to science until relatively recently. Not because they are rare, they happen constantly, above storms all over the world, but because they are so brief, and they occur above the clouds, and no one had cameras sensitive enough and positioned correctly to see them. They have been happening every stormy night for as long as there have been storms. The sky above the weather is not empty. It is full of light that no one on the ground has ever seen. And sometimes, on days with no storms at all, on clear blue afternoons, when the sky appears completely untroubled, something else falls from it. Small spheres of ice. Not hailstones. Hailstones have a character you recognize, a roughness, a layered structure built up through repeated cycles of freezing in turbulent cloud systems. These are different, smooth, almost perfectly round, polished in a way that suggests an entirely different formation process. They fall in clusters, sometimes hundreds scattered across an open field. On days when no storm cloud is visible anywhere in the sky, they land gently enough not to leave marks, and when you examine them closely, they split along delicate internal seams, hinting at pressure changes during their fall. The most careful current explanation suggests that they form in extremely stable layers of air high above the ground, that tiny particles serve as nuclei around which ice crystals grow slowly, in conditions so calm and so precisely balanced that the result is a near-perfect sphere, rather than the irregular shape of ordinary frozen precipitation. But the conditions required are so specific that the phenomenon is vanishingly rare. And when it does occur, the sky delivers these small, perfect objects to the ground, without announcement, without storm, without any of the usual drama that accompanies ice falling from clouds. Just spheres appearing in fields under clear skies, as if someone had been practicing geometry at altitude. Let me take you now to the deep, much deeper than the glowing surface of the ocean, down past the twilight zone, where the last light fades, past the midnight zone, where the pressure becomes enormous and the temperature approaches freezing, down to the Hadal zone, the trenches, the deepest places on Earth, where the seafloor drops away into chasms that have barely been explored. Here in the dark, in the silence, researchers have placed hydrophones, and occasionally those instruments record something unexpected. A roar, not the call of any known whale. Researchers have catalogued those with some thoroughness, and this is nothing like them. Not the grinding of icebergs, not the low rumble of submarine volcanic activity. Something else. A burst of sound that surges into existence with surprising clarity. that echoes across miles of water and then stops. Some of these sounds have been named informally by the researchers who first recorded them. The bloop, the upsweep, the slow down, each with its own distinctive character, each occurring in specific regions of the ocean, each resisting clean explanation. The bloop was eventually attributed to icequake activity, the sound of large ice masses fracturing and shifting in Antarctic waters. That explanation came years after the initial recording and required significant analysis. Others remain less settled. The deep ocean is vast. It is layered with pressure and darkness, and a silence that is not, it turns out, actually silent. Things happen down there. Biological, geological, chemical events that produce sound, and some of that sound reaches our instruments in forms that don't match anything in our catalogue. Something is making noise in the deep. We are still learning what. Come back toward the surface.
Not all the way. Stay in the water, somewhere in the middle depths, where light is scarce, but not entirely absent. Here, in certain coral reef systems, something has been observed that researchers initially struggled to believe. The coral pulses with light. Not the coral in the way of bioluminescence, not individual polyps producing flashes. The light moves across the reef in waves. It travels from one colony to the next in coordinated sequences, forming arcs and spirals that sweep through entire sections of reef with a timing and precision that suggests something almost neurological. The tiny cells embedded in the coral tissue release brief bursts of light, but they do so in coordination with their neighbors, and those neighbors coordinate with theirs until an entire hillside of coral is engaged in what looks, from a distance, like a slow, luminous conversation. Researchers believe the pulses may serve as communication, signals triggered by changes in water chemistry, by the presence of predators, by shifts in pressure. But the speed and complexity of the displays exceed what simple chemical signaling should allow. The reef appears to be thinking in light. In a structure made of calcium carbonate and living tissue, in water, in the dark, something is coordinating. Something is sending messages. And those messages travel in waves of cold, blue fire across the most ancient and complex ecosystems in the ocean. Now come all the way up, past the water's surface, past the low clouds, past the weather, into the very high atmosphere where the air is thin and cold and the stars are more clearly visible. On certain nights, not every night, not predictably, observers in remote locations have seen something that doesn't fit the catalog of familiar sky events. Broad ripples of light sweeping across the sky. Not auroras, not the familiar curtains of green and red and purple that most people associate with the northern and southern lights.
Something paler, more expansive, more uniform, pale bands of brightness drifting from horizon to horizon with the slow, deliberate motion of ocean swells as if the sky itself were a surface with waves passing through it. High sensitivity cameras capture these events and reveal patterns that do indeed resemble fluid dynamics. Waves propagating through thin atmospheric layers, causing faint variations in the faint natural glow that the upper atmosphere always produces. But some of these displays are brighter than current models easily explain. They form without storms, without solar disturbances, without any trigger obvious enough to account for what the cameras record. The sky, on certain quiet nights, simply moves in slow, pale waves that cross the Falark from one horizon to the other, in silence, while almost everyone below is asleep. I want to tell you about glaciers now, about something that happens when you stand near one, in a certain season, at a certain time of day. You hear it before you see anything. A tone, low, sustained, drifting out of the ice itself. Not the cracking and groaning you might expect. Not the dramatic sounds of glacial carving or the creak of moving ice. Something different. Something almost musical. A long, clear note that seems to come from deep within the frozen mass, as if the glacier were a single enormous instrument, finding its fundamental frequency. Researchers studying these acoustic events have traced some of them to meltwater, channels carved by water moving through the ice that act, in the right conditions, like natural wind instruments. The water moves, the channel resonates, and a tone emerges. But not all of the melodies fit this explanation. Some notes are too smooth, too sustained, too harmonically structured for a simple water channel. Temperature changes cause ice slabs to expand and contract, producing long, resonant moans. Internal pressure changes create vibrations that travel through the entire body of the glacier before emerging at the surface as sound. Each glacier has its own voice, its own particular collection of tones that changes with the season, with the temperature, with the state of the ice inside it. In spring, when melt begins, the voice changes. In deep winter, when the ice locks into silence, the songs stop. And in those particular moments in between, when conditions align just right, when the temperature and pressure and internal architecture of the ice reach a precise and temporary balance, a glacier will sing a single pure note, drifting across the frozen valley, to no audience, for no reason except physics. Let me tell you about one more thing before this chapter rests. Ball lightning. It has been reported across centuries, across cultures, across every continent. A glowing sphere, sometimes the size of a golf ball, sometimes the size of a basketball, occasionally larger, that drifts through the air with what witnesses consistently describe as an uncanny sense of intention. It moves horizontally, it rises, it navigates around obstacles, it passes through open windows without disturbing the curtains. It holds its brightness in a steady glow rather than a flash. And then, after seconds or minutes that feel much longer, it either fades quietly or disappears with a small pop. Laboratory scientists have managed to create brief imitations, glowing plasma formations that last for fractions of a second. But none of them behave the way the reported phenomenon behaves. None drift with that characteristic deliberate motion. None navigate. None last long enough to enter a room, cross it and exit through the other side. Various theories have been proposed: trapped electromagnetic fields, self-stabilizing plasma sustained by chemical reactions, microwave radiation from lightning, creating burning silicon vapor. None of them fully account for all the characteristics of what witnesses describe. The phenomenon appears unpredictably, in locations impossible to anticipate, and is gone before any instrument can be properly directed at it. What makes ball lightning so particularly interesting to me is not that it is unexplained. Many things are unexplained. It is that it has been consistently described, with consistent characteristics, by independent witnesses across completely different times and cultures. There is something there, something real, following rules we haven't found yet. A visitor made of light, guided by principles we haven't written down, appearing in ordinary rooms and ordinary fields and ordinary afternoons, and reminding whoever sees it that the physical world still has room for surprises. Let everything from tonight rest now. The ocean glowing without life, the sky flashing above its own storms, the perfect spheres falling from clear air, the roaring in the deep that has no name, the coral thinking in light, the pale waves crossing the night sky while everyone sleeps, the glacier finding its voice in the cold, the sphere of light drifting through a room and then gently, quietly disappearing. All of it real, all of it confirmed by instruments, by satellite, by researchers who went to these places and saw these things and came back with data that said, yes, this is happening, and no, we don't fully know why. The world is not running out of mysteries. It is producing them continuously, in every element, at every scale, with a generosity that seems almost deliberate. Let that be the thought that carries you a little further towards sleep. Not the urgency of the unknown, not the anxiety of the unexplained, just the spaciousness of it, the room that mystery makes in the mind, the particular kind of rest that comes from knowing you are held inside a world that is still, after everything, surprising. Let your breath slow. Let the pale waves cross the sky in your mind, horizon to horizon, in the dark, in silence. Let the glacier hold its note a little longer. There is a question that keeps returning to me as I think about the natural world. Not a frightening question, a humbling one. How much of what is happening around us right now, in the air, in the soil, in the water, in the bodies of the creatures we share this planet with, how much of it is simply invisible to us? Not because it isn't there, not because it is hiding, but because we don't have the equipment to receive it, because our senses, extraordinary as they are, are tuned to a particular narrow band of what exists. And outside that band, in the frequencies too low or too high, in the electromagnetic fields too subtle, in the chemical gradients too faint, life is conducting an enormous and continuous conversation that we are not party to. Tonight I want to let you listen at the edges of that conversation, not to understand it fully. That isn't possible yet, and may never be completely possible, but to sense its presence, to feel the shape of the world that other creatures inhabit, a world layered on top of ours, using the same air and water and ground, but reading from it an entirely different text. Begin with something you may have seen, or may have only imagined seeing. A murmuration of starlings, thousands of birds moving together through the sky as a single fluid form, expanding, contracting, folding in on itself, splitting and rejoining, with a speed and coherence that seems to defy any individual bird's ability to coordinate with any other. The whole thing moves like a single organism, like something breathing, like something thinking. Scientists studying murmurations have discovered something interesting about how the coordination works. Each bird responds to its immediate neighbors, the 7 or so birds closest to it in 3-dimensional space, not to the whole flock, not to a leader, just to the nearest 7. And from that simple local rule, applied simultaneously by thousands of birds, the whole emerges, the wave, the fold, the sudden collective turn that ripples through the entire formation in a fraction of a second. But here is what the studies also show. The speed of information transfer through the flock exceeds what the visual response time of individual birds should allow. When a turn begins at one edge, it reaches the other edge faster than the signal should be able to travel, as if the flock is somehow anticipating, as if the information moves through the group by a mechanism that hasn't been fully identified. Some researchers suggest infrasound. Others propose that birds sense faint pressure changes in the air around their neighbors. Changes so small they are below the threshold of any instrument yet brought to the problem. Others are still looking. What is clear is that the flock knows something the individual bird doesn't know. That something passes between them that creates collective intelligence from individual simplicity, and that we can see the result. This breathtaking liquid, seemingly intentional shape in the sky, without yet fully understanding what carries it. Now come down from the sky to the forest floor, to a place you might walk through on an autumn evening without stopping. A place that looks, to ordinary attention, like fallen leaves and damp soil, and the ordinary quiet of a woodland after sunset. Look more carefully. In certain forests, in certain seasons, certain species of fungi glow, not brightly, not like a lamp or a torch, a soft, cold, greenish light that is only visible when your eyes are fully adjusted to the dark. A light that seems to come from the mycelium itself, from the underground network of fungal threads that connects the mushrooms you see on the surface to a system that extends throughout the soil beneath your feet. Researchers monitoring this glow over long periods have noticed something that doesn't fit simple explanation. The brightness changes with the phases of the moon, not because moonlight is powering it. The glow persists even in complete darkness, in controlled laboratory conditions with no lunar input whatsoever. But the rhythm of the glow, its peaks and valleys of intensity, tracks a lunar cycle with a consistency that suggests the fungi possess some internal clock, tuned to the moon's approximately 29-day cycle. One theory proposes that humidity and temperature shifts driven by lunar tidal effects influence the chemistry of the fungal tissue. Another suggests that the fungi evolved to attract insects that help disperse their spores on nights of particular lunar brightness, and that the glow is part of that attraction system. What makes this remarkable is not just the lunar connection, remarkable as that is. It is the image of the network itself. The light doesn't appear uniformly across the fungal body. It moves through it in slow waves, brightening in one section, fading in another, traveling through the mycelium like a pulse through a nervous system. The forest floor is communicating with itself in light, on a lunar schedule, in a language older than anything we've written down. Come to the edge of a wetland now, to the kind of place where the light fails early, and the air is warm and heavy with moisture, and the darkness arrives gradually, tree by tree. And wait, because on certain nights in certain parts of the world, what happens here is one of the most astonishing things a living planet produces. The fireflies begin, not individually, not the scattered random blinking of fireflies as most people know them. Here, in these specific places, something different happens. The fireflies begin to synchronize, first in small clusters, then larger, then across the whole visible landscape. Every tree, every bush, every open space, flashing in perfect unison. The hillside lights up, goes dark, lights up again, dark, light, dark, in a rhythm so precise, it is difficult to believe it is not orchestrated. Each firefly adjusts its own rhythm, based on the flashes of its neighbors, a process of entrainment, of mutual influence, that somehow scales from individual adjustment to collective perfection across thousands of individuals spanning hundreds of meters. The mathematics of how this works has been studied extensively, and researchers have found that the synchronization happens faster and achieves greater precision than simple visual feedback between neighbors should allow. There appear to be additional channels of communication, possibly faint vibrations, possibly chemical signals that help the information propagate more quickly through the assembled population. Whatever the mechanism, the result is this: a hillside of living light, pulsing in unison, in the dark, in a forest, on a warm night. No conductor, no score, no rehearsal. Just thousands of small creatures following rules so simple they fit in a nervous system smaller than a grain of rice, and producing from those simple rules something that looks, from the outside, like choreography, like intention, like art. I want to tell you about whales, specifically about a quality of whale culture that I find, every time I think about it, genuinely astonishing. Humpback whales sing. This is well established. The males produce long, complex vocalizations during breeding season. Sequences of phrases organized into themes, themes organized into songs, songs that can last for hours, and that follow rules of structure sophisticated enough that researchers analyze them with the same tools used for human music. But here is what is less widely known. The songs change, not gradually over geological time, not over decades, season to season. A melody that dominates one year may be almost entirely gone the next, replaced by something new that is spread through the population with remarkable speed. And the changes don't drift randomly. They spread directionally, moving through populations that span entire ocean basins, transmitted from whale to whale across distances of thousands of miles. The whales are not just singing, they are learning, adopting new material, participating in what looks, structurally, like cultural transmission. A song begins somewhere, with a particular individual or small group in one part of the ocean. Within a season or two, that song has traveled across thousands of miles of open water, absorbed by populations that rarely, if ever, come into direct contact with the originators. How this transmission happens across such distances between populations with limited contact remains genuinely unclear. What is clear is that something is moving between them, something that carries musical information, specific phrases, specific rhythms, specific innovations, across the darkness of the deep ocean, and deposits it intact in the vocal repertoire of whales who were nowhere near the source. The ocean carries culture in sound through the dark. Now I want to talk about something that happens on a smaller scale, but feels, if anything, even stranger. Animals and earthquakes. It has been observed across cultures and across centuries, long enough that it was once dismissed as superstition, documented consistently enough that it is now taken seriously as a scientific question. In the hours and sometimes days before significant earthquakes, certain animals change their behavior in ways that suggest they are receiving information about what is coming. Dogs grow restless without apparent cause. Birds erupt from their roosts and don't return. Fish alter their swimming patterns. Snakes emerge from burrows in winter. Entire herds of animals move away from areas that will later be severely affected through terrain that offers no visual sign of danger. Some of these responses can be partially explained. Animals are sensitive to infrasound, vibrations too low for human hearing, that may precede earthquakes by hours. Some species detect subtle changes in the electrical properties of the air or soil that occur when rock under stress begins to fracture. Others may sense the faint foreshocks that occur before major events, but are too small for humans to notice. But some responses happen too early and too specifically to fit comfortably within these explanations. Some animals appear to react to events that produce no detectable precursor signal. At least, none that our instruments can find. It is as if they are reading from a text we don't have access to. As if the earthquake announces itself in a language we haven't learned. And these creatures, shaped by millions of years of evolution in a world that shakes, have learned to hear it. Come now to something that crosses the boundary between the world outside and the world inside. To something that happens not in the forest or the ocean, but in the human mind. Déjà vu. The feeling, familiar to almost everyone, of having experienced a moment before. Usually it passes quickly and is easily dismissed as a quirk of memory processing, an artifact of how the brain retrieves and cross-references experience. But there is a form of it that is harder to dismiss. Some people report the sensation not in familiar surroundings, not in places that might reasonably echo something from their past, but in places they have never been. In a street they are visiting for the first time, in a city they have never visited, in a building they couldn't have seen in any photograph. A certainty descends, not a vague impression, a vivid, specific recognition. This doorway, this angle of light, this particular arrangement of space. Neuroscientists have explored how the brain retrieves spatial information, how layouts and lighting and proportion can trigger overlapping neural pathways in ways that create false recognition. And for many cases, this framework holds. But there are experiences that resist it, where the architecture is genuinely novel, where the specific details produce not a vague sense of familiarity, but a strong, specific certainty. I have been here. I know this place. Some researchers explore whether the brain sometimes constructs predictive models so accurately from the information arriving in the first fraction of a second of perception that recognition and first experience become nearly simultaneous, as if the brain, in certain moments, runs so far ahead of conscious awareness that it has already processed the experience before the conscious mind has registered that it's having one. Others remain genuinely uncertain. What I find worth holding about this phenomenon, what makes it relevant to tonight, to this particular hour, is the feeling it describes. The sense that time is not quite as linear as it usually appears. That the boundary between remembering and experiencing is not as solid as it seems. That the mind contains depths of processing that are mostly invisible to the conscious self, and that occasionally, in certain kinds of moments, a shaft of light falls through from those depths into ordinary awareness. The mind is larger than the part of it you inhabit. That is not a frightening thought at this hour. It is a spacious one. One more thing before we rest. During periods of intense solar activity, when the sun's magnetic field interacts with Earth's in ways that produce geomagnetic storms, a small number of people report something unusual. They hear music, not tinnitus, not the ringing or buzzing of inner ear disturbance. Something different. Faint musical tones that seem to come from the surrounding environment. Distant chords, soft harmonic progressions, sustained notes that drift through the air, and then fade when the geomagnetic conditions stabilize. Instruments placed nearby detect no sound waves. The air is vibrating, technically. Charged particles interacting with the upper atmosphere create acoustic effects that propagate downward, but at levels far too faint to explain what some people describe hearing. The current theory, held with appropriate tentativeness, is that the rapid shifts in Earth's magnetic field during solar storms may influence neural activity in certain individuals. That the electrical environment of the brain, which is itself an electromagnetic phenomenon, responds to changes in the electromagnetic environment around it in ways that create the perception of sound. The cosmos in this reading is speaking directly to the nervous system, using the planet's magnetic field as a medium, and a small number of people, for reasons not yet understood, are sensitive enough to receive the signal. They hear the sun in music through their own nervous system on quiet nights when the sky is filled with light that most people are asleep to notice. Let everything settle now, the flock turning in perfect unison, the forest floor pulsing in lunar light, the hillside of synchronized fireflies, the whales transmitting their songs across thousands of miles of dark water, the animals moving away from what is coming, the mind recognizing a place it has never been, the few quiet people who hear music in magnetic storms. All of these point toward the same thing. The world is fuller than it appears. The conversation is larger than the part of it we can hear. Other creatures are reading texts we don't have access to, navigating by cues we can't detect, communicating through channels we are only beginning to find. And sometimes, rarely, briefly, in particular conditions, something from that broader conversation reaches us too. A flash of recognition in an unfamiliar place. A feeling in a quiet moment of something just beyond the threshold of perception. The sense that the world around you is not just backdrop, but participant. Not just setting, but presence. This is not mysticism, it is biology. It is the natural consequence of sharing a planet with millions of species, shaped by millions of years of evolution, into receivers for signals we haven't catalogued yet. The world is listening. It is also speaking. And you, lying here in the quiet of this hour, are part of that conversation, whether you know it or not. Let your breathing slow to something unhurried. Let your body sink a little deeper into its resting place. Let the forest floor pulse softly in its lunar rhythm. Let the whales carry their songs through the dark water. Let the flock turn. You don't have to do anything with any of this. Just rest inside a world that is fuller than it looks. We have come tonight through layers, through the humming interior of the planet, through glowing oceans and singing glaciers, through the hidden sensory worlds of fireflies and whales, and the few quiet humans who hear music in magnetic storms. And now we arrive at the outermost edge, at the place where the questions get largest, where the signals come from so far away that by the time they reach us, the source that made them may no longer exist, where the structures built by ancient hands encode knowledge about the sky that we are still learning to read, where the boundary between the cosmos and the human mind becomes, in certain rare and extraordinary moments, harder to locate than we might expect. This is the last chapter of tonight, and it begins as all the best things do, with light from very far away. There are radio telescopes listening to the sky right now, vast dishes aimed at different regions of the universe, recording the electromagnetic whispers that reach us from distances so enormous that the numbers require a different kind of thinking to hold. Not miles, not thousands of miles, light years. The distance light travels in an entire year, moving at the fastest speed the universe allows. And occasionally, from somewhere out there in that incomprehensible distance, these instruments detect something unexpected. A burst, a flash of radio energy lasting only a fraction of a second, but carrying in that fraction of a second as much energy as the sun releases in days, arriving at our instruments with a structure, a pattern, a shape in the data that is crisp and specific and real. These are called fast radio bursts, and they remain, despite years of study and multiple competing theories, genuinely unexplained. Some appear only once and never repeat. Others return, arriving in pulses separated by intervals that don't correspond to any known stellar process. Some cycles appear orderly. Others show irregular patterns that still, mysteriously, manage to circle back to a core rhythm. What makes them particularly astonishing is the distance. The signals have been traveling for millions of years before reaching us, crossing intergalactic space, passing through material between galaxies, arriving at our instruments with their structure intact after a journey of almost unimaginable length. Something made them, something energetic enough to release, in milliseconds, the power output of millions of suns. Magnetized neutron stars are the leading candidate, exotic remnants of collapsed massive stars with magnetic fields so intense they can cause catastrophic releases of energy. But no single model accounts for every characteristic of every burst. Some bursts shift slightly in frequency as they travel, as if moving through environments of changing density. Others remain astonishingly consistent across observations, as if produced with a regularity that suggests something almost mechanical. Whatever is making them, it is doing so in conditions that no longer exist anywhere in our observable neighborhood. It is doing so in galaxies that look nothing like ours, at distances so vast that by the time the signal arrives, civilizations could have risen and fallen 1,000 times over on any nearby planets. And yet the signal arrives, crisp, structured, carrying information about the conditions of its birth. The universe is speaking in the language we have only just learned to detect, and we don't yet know what it's saying. Come closer now, from the intergalactic distances to our own small corner of the galaxy, to a star about 1,000 light years away, close by cosmic standards, though still so far that the light reaching our eyes left it around the time of the medieval period, travelling ever since through the dark between stars. This star, the one astronomers have taken to calling by the informal name Tabby Star, after the researcher who first brought its behaviour to wide attention, does something that no straightforward model fully explains. It dims, not slightly, not regularly, not in the smooth, predictable pattern of the planet passing in front of it. It dims by large fractions, sometimes 20% of its total brightness, in irregular patterns of strange complexity. Steps, sharp drops, asymmetric dips that rise slowly and fall quickly, or fall slowly and rise quickly. Intervals that seem almost structured but resist pattern matching against known phenomena. Dust clouds can explain some dimming events. Swarms of comets are among the proposals. Unusual star spot activity, intrinsic stellar variability. But with each new observation campaign, the pattern grows richer rather than simpler. New features emerge. The light curve, the record of how the star's brightness changes over time, accumulates new complexity the more carefully it is studied. It feels to the researchers who have spent years on this problem less like a puzzle being solved and more like a puzzle that keeps adding pieces. The star is not doing anything impossible. Stars dim for many reasons, but this star seems to be dimming for reasons that don't fit any single clean explanation. And the pattern of how it dims has a quality that is genuinely difficult to describe without reaching, however cautiously, for words like deliberate or structured. Astronomers are careful people. They resist such words for good reason, but the light curve is what it is, and what it is strange. Now come from the stars down to Earth, down to the places where people, long before telescopes and radio arrays and the whole apparatus of modern astronomy, looked up at the same sky we see tonight and built things. At New Grange in Ireland, a passage tomb constructed more than 5,000 years ago, older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids. A narrow corridor was aligned so precisely with the rising sun on the winter solstice that for a few minutes each year, the first light of the shortest day travels exactly down the passage and illuminates the chamber at its end. On every other day of the year, the chamber is dark. Only on that one morning, at that one moment, the light arrives, and it has been arriving for 5,000 years. The precision required for this is not accidental. The builders had to observe the sunrise on the winter solstice across multiple years, track its exact position on the horizon, orient the passage to that position with accuracy that modern surveyors confirm is genuinely remarkable, and then construct the monument to a standard of precision that would maintain that alignment across centuries. They did this without instruments in the modern sense, without written mathematics, without any of the tools we assume are necessary for that kind of accuracy. What they had was time, generations of careful observation, a deep cultural commitment to understanding the sky well enough to encode that understanding in stone that would last. Newgrange is not unique. Across the world, structures from cultures that had no contact with each other show similar alignments to solstices, to equinoxes, to the rising and setting points of specific stars at specific seasons. The precision varies, but the intention is consistent. These ancient builders were doing something that we now do with computers and space telescopes, tracking the rhythms of the cosmos carefully enough to predict them and building the record of that tracking into something that would survive the individual human lives that created it. The sky was their laboratory, and some of what they learned they wrote in stone. Let me tell you about something discovered in caves. Not the cave paintings most people know about. The animals and handprints left by prehistoric artists across the world. Something more specific. Patterns, symbols, arrangements of marks that appear across different cave art traditions, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. Spirals that resemble the structure of galaxies, photographed by modern telescopes. Branching shapes that look like the filaments of the cosmic web. The large-scale structure of matter in the universe, mapped only in recent decades. Arrangements of dots that correspond to star clusters, visible with the naked eye, on particular nights of the year. Archaeologists examining these symbols are careful about interpretation. It is easy to see patterns that aren't there. Coincidence explains many things, but in some cases, the symbols align so closely with specific astronomical events. Events rare enough to occur only a few times in the human lifetime, that the explanation of deliberate recording becomes difficult to avoid. Someone saw something in the sky, something that moved them enough to climb into a cave and mark it on the wall. And what they marked bears a relationship to what modern instruments have confirmed, in ways that suggest these early skywatchers had both the observational skill and the cultural memory to track celestial events across generations. Without instruments, without writing in many cases, with eyes and time, and the human capacity to notice patterns and remember them, and pass that memory forward. In the dark of the cave, they left a record. In the dark of the cave, we are still reading it. There is something I want to tell you about the human mind before we finish. Something that sits at the very edge of what we understand about perception and consciousness, and the relationship between the brain and the world it inhabits. The brain generates its own light, not metaphorically, literally. When you close your eyes in complete darkness, when there is no external light source whatsoever, and allow yourself to rest in that darkness, you may notice something. Flickers, brief sparks of brightness, small geometries of light that appear and fade without any obvious cause. These are called phosphenes when triggered mechanically, by pressure on the eyes or by the visual cortex being stimulated electrically. But what happens in deep relaxation, or in the transition towards sleep is something slightly different. Spontaneous activity in the visual cortex, neurons firing in coordinated bursts for reasons that have nothing to do with incoming light, creates the experience of brightness. The brain, in the absence of the world, begins to generate its own version of seeing. This is not pathological, it is normal. It happens most noticeably during the transition into sleep, in deep meditation, in states of profound relaxation, precisely the states that may be gathering around you right now, as this evening moves into its final quietness. Your visual cortex, freed from the work of processing the external world, begins to do something else. It plays. It generates images from its own internal activity, without reference to anything outside the skull. And the quality of those internal images, their vividness, their geometry, the particular way they appear and dissolve, varies between people in ways that are not fully mapped. Some people see elaborate geometric patterns. Others see simple flashes. Some see faces or landscapes. Others see nothing but a quality of brightness that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere. The brain contains its own source of light, one that requires only darkness and quiet to become visible. One more thing. There are reports, scattered, consistent across cultures, impossible to systematically study but impossible to entirely dismiss, of people who wake suddenly in the quiet of the night with a particular quality of certainty. Not a dream, not a vague unease, a specific knowing, a sense that something is happening or is about to happen at a distance too great for any normal sense to bridge. And then, minutes or hours later, something does. The scientific literature on this is thin and contested for obvious reasons. These events are unpredictable, rare, and resist the controlled conditions that good research requires. The cases that are documented exist at the edges of the literature, studied cautiously by researchers who know how easy it is to be fooled by coincidence and the retrospective shaping of memory. But the reports keep coming from different times, different cultures, different people with no reason to coordinate their accounts. Something happens at the boundary between the sleeping mind and the larger world. What exactly? Whether it is genuine perception of something beyond ordinary sensory range, or the mind's extraordinary pattern recognition, operating on information too faint to reach conscious awareness, or something else entirely, remains genuinely open. What I find worth holding here at the end of tonight is simply this. The mind is not fully mapped. The relationship between what happens inside a human skull and what is happening in the world outside it. The relationship between consciousness and cosmos is one of the great open questions. Not because we have no answers, but because the answers we have keep revealing deeper questions beneath them. And in that openness, there is something that feels, in the right kind of light, like an invitation to pay attention to the world that is larger than the part of it we can explain, to the signals that arrive from distances we cannot imagine, to the patterns left by hands in stone, in the dark, the someone they would never meet to find, to the light the brain generates in its own interior, in the quiet moments when the world outside is gone still. Here we are, at the end of a long journey tonight. We began with the earth itself, the hum beneath hearing, the singing mountains, the rocks that move in silent patience across desert floors. We moved into the sky and into the depths of water, the glowing ocean, the glaciers finding their voice, the coral reefs thinking in light. We listened to the hidden conversation of living things, the fireflies synchronizing on dark hillsides, the whales transmitting culture across ocean basins, the few people who receive signals the rest of us sleep through. And we ended here, at the outermost edge, with signals from other galaxies and ancient monuments that still track the solstice, and the quiet light the resting brain makes for itself in the dark. What runs through all of it, the thread connecting a mystery in the Earth's interior to a radio burst from a distant galaxy, is something simple. The world is not finished being surprising, not in the way that feels alarming, in the way that feels like space, like room to breathe, like standing at night in an open place and realizing that what you can see is only the beginning of what exists. That feeling, that specific quality of expanded awareness, is one of the most peaceful states the human mind can occupy. Not because it resolves anything, because it makes the small urgencies of daily life look, for a moment, like what they actually are: small and temporary, held inside something vastly larger and older and more interesting than they are. If you have been here all the way to this moment, if you traveled through the chapters of this evening and arrived at this quiet place still listening, then something in tonight was for you. And if it was, I want to ask you something small. Leave a like if you can. It tells other curious minds, other people lying in the dark, looking for something that will carry them gently towards sleep, that this is a place worth finding. Each like is a small signal sent forward, like a radio burst in miniature, helping the algorithm understand that slow and careful and genuinely curious is something people want. And if soothing science has become part of your evenings, if these journeys into the strange and beautiful and not yet understood have given you something to rest inside, subscribe if you haven't yet, so the next journey is there when you need it, so we can keep going to the edges together. This is a space for people who find wonder restful, who know that learning something real, told in the right way, can carry you towards sleep rather than away from it, who understand that the universe being larger than we can explain is not a problem to be solved, but a quality to be appreciated. If that is you, you are exactly where you belong. And now, there is nothing left to do. The fast radio bursts are still arriving. Right now, as you read this, as you rest, traveling the last fraction of their million-year journey and touching our instruments for the first time. The fireflies are synchronized on the hillside, somewhere in the dark. The glacier is holding its note. The forest floor is pulsing in its lunar rhythm. The earth is humming its constant low hum beneath everything, whether anyone is listening or not. All of it is continuing right now, in the dark, without requiring anything from you, except that you rest inside it. Let your breathing slow to something that matches the pace of deep things. Let the weight of your body settle into wherever you are lying. Let the day, everything it asked of you, everything it took, let it recede now to the distance of something seen from far away. Small, manageable, held inside a night that is itself held inside a universe, still full of things we don't yet understand and haven't yet found. You are a creature of remarkable sensitivity, resting on a humming planet, beneath a sky full of signals from distances you can't imagine. At the end of a day that is already becoming the past, you have done enough. You have wondered enough for tonight. The questions will still be there in the morning. The mysteries will still be waiting. And so will we. Good night. Sleep well. And I will see you next time, wherever our curiosity takes us.